Hello, my name is Nadine and welcome to Hop Along Studio. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you 5 different ways you can move past creative blocks. So creative blocks happen to all of us. It isn't unusual to be going through your art practice and also having moments of feeling really meh. Like, I'm not creative, I don't really feel like creating, and that's a really hard place to be. It's not always easy to move past that. So I'm going to be sharing the 5 ways that I usually move past creative blocks in my own creative practice. So the first thing I always do when I'm running into a creative block is start with some creative play. A creative play for me has been really important for just developing ideas just for this channel and really moving me past those moments of feeling really uninspired. A couple weeks ago I actually did share a video using some stamps and pan pastels that I have used as a practice for when I run into creative blocks. I started just by stamping some things down, adding some pan pastels. The intention with creative play isn't to create a project. The idea is to just experiment with the materials that you have and just see what comes of it. And I usually try to limit my materials. I try not to be working with too many mediums at one time because that can sometimes feel overwhelming as well. So one thing I really like about creative play is I always learn something. It's either I learn what to do or what not to do with certain art products, and it often helps me figure out what works together when I'm mixing mediums for my creative practice. So the second way that I move past the creative block is changing my environment. Often I work inside when I'm doing my creative practice, and if I'm feeling uninspired, I often come out here to my garden with a sketchbook and kind of see what happens. I think it's important that we all have a place that we find rejuvenating, and just by changing those surroundings so somewhere that you feel at peace and calm can be a great way to get those creative juices flowing. And what I find about working in the garden or just working out in nature is that I see textures and colors and patterns that often lead to helping me figure out how I can use those in my creative practice. I find nature just so inspiring when it comes down to colors and textures that often get incorporated in my art journal projects. So the third way I move past a creative block is by using reference photos. Reference photos can be pictures that you take yourself. It can be also something you find from another photographer or another artist. I find that creating from your imagination, especially when you're started in some of these creative practices, can be so hard. We don't necessarily always know exactly what a flower or what a building or a landscape should look like. There's a lot of details there that we might not be totally aware of. And so by using the reference photos, it's just a jumping off point. That doesn't mean that you need to follow it exactly, and actually I would caution you not to follow a reference photo exactly, because then you might run into some copyright issues. But you can take a picture that you see and abstract it, or pixelate it, or do something else with it to make it your own. And so that's where I find reference photos very useful for moving past those creative blocks. So the fourth way you can move past a creative block is trying different artistic styles. Sometimes for me that means picking up a different medium. I'll be sitting and working in acrylic paint for a while, and then I move to watercolor, or I'll move from doing art journaling to scrapbooking. I have a variety of mediums that I use and a variety of types of mediums I like using in my practice, and often if I've been stuck in one for a while, I find that just trying something else using a slightly different medium can make all the difference. Also, I love looking online at some of the great masters. I think about the Group of Seven, Vincent van Gogh, Monet. There's a lot of places you can get inspiration from, and you don't have a copy of their work. You can look at it and say, I love those colors, I love that brush stroke, and that can be enough to help you move past some of those blocks you get and get into a better creative place. So the fifth way that I like to move past the creative block is by being kind to myself. So often we put so much pressure on ourselves to create. Well, we only have an hour, we need to get it all done in that time. And I've really tried to embrace the idea of not putting time limits on myself, not putting a lot of pressure on myself to create at a certain time. We need to show ourselves kindness and compassion as we create, because creating is a very personal process, and by giving ourselves that space just to be, it's amazing the things that we can accomplish. One thing I've realized is the more expensive the canvas and the more expensive the paint, the more pressure I put on myself to create something that's beautiful. And there's something to be said about just giving yourself the space and time. If it's a beautiful new book you have and you need to start that first page, don't worry about it being perfect. It's so easy to fall into this and to judge ourselves, and it doesn't help us in the end. And part of being kind to myself has been listening to my body, realizing that there's certain times a day I am the most creative. For me, it's about between 8 and 10 in the morning. I've talked to other friends and they're like, after my kids go to bed, that's my creative time because they feel fresh, they feel more rejuvenated late at night. One thing I've realized is nighttime is not a great time for me to do a creative practice. And so I actually plan my creative time around when I have the most energy. And so by listening to our bodies, by showing ourselves kindness and compassion, that can be a really powerful way to move us past the creative block. So how do you manage creative blocks in your life? I would love to hear what you have to say about creative blocks, and I hope that you have found this video useful, and maybe it's a way that will help you move past those blocks. And if you've enjoyed this video, if you could like it, subscribe to my channel, and maybe provide a comment below about what you liked about this video or your own experience with creative blocks. You can also see the article that's linked to this video on my website, helpalongstudio.com. I also have lots of other ideas on how to have a creative practice in your life there on my website. I hope you have a really great week and that you take some time for some creative self-care. See you next time.